Yeah, I really wanted to expound on the gang culture in Los Angeles. When I first came to Los Angeles, I lived behind the Watchtower. And one day I was back there and I met the guy that was building it. And I asked him, I said, man, you seen my brother? And he said, your brother went up on one of my towers. And I said, well, I'm finna go up there and get him. Well, he said, no, your brother didn't go up there. But I said, why is you building this tower? He said, I'm building this tower because one day in this community, I'm taking a lot of trash, bottles, and cement. And one day people will look up to this tower and understand that it was built from nothing. And I see that today Watts was built from nothing. And I see that the tower represents power and it represents unity and it represents Watts. And I always was wondering why I had met this guy when I was a little kid. And from there, I moved to over there by 84th and Compton Avenue, which I read a guy named Butchie. Butchie still lives over there. And Butchie used to raise rabbits and we used to raise hamsters and we used to trade different animals back then. And then we moved over there by Drew Junior High School. And from Drew Junior High School, I ended up running into the real OG Crips of that time, which was Porter Hill and a guy named Ronnie McKnighton, Ghost. And not only that, Ronnie McKnighton was Kitchen Crips. That was one of the first gangs that I learned about when I was a kid, was a guy named Ronnie McKnighton. And he was a good family member of my family. And 4 days later, or a week later, he ended up catching a murder. And I never seen him again. And I always wanted to meet Ronnie McKnight. And I don't know if he would remember me. I'm Keith Fisher's brother. And then from there, we moved to over there on 68 and Central. And we started hanging with some guys on our street. And one guy was original Crip. His name was Squeak. And he was kind of like our leader. And they started the 68th Street Boys. And it was so many of us lived on that street. We started our own gang, and Raymond Washington had blessed our street. And I remember back in the days, we couldn't go past Gage because the Outlaws was real deep down there. So when we started going to high school, we run into these guys from East Coast, Hoovers and everything. And one day we was at the school and we met these guys from 6'8". And we was like, man, where y'all from? He said, we from 6'8". And then we said, we from 6'8" too. And he was like, is that right? So I said, okay. So we started hanging out. And that was one of the first times I came into contact with a lot of the 6'8", 6'9", 6 Deuce, all of those East Coasters, and a lot of Hoovers was there too. And it wasn't really beefing back then. And then we just started hanging out. Then we started, the cocaine era kind of like blew up because I remember back in the days when Goodyear was there, it was a lot of jobs. And when the jobs left California, the vacuum just was crazy because it was just it was just people everywhere with no income. And that's how the gangs really blew up in Los Angeles. And then not only that, we always worshiped Raymond Washington. Raymond Washington was a guy that he was a force at his size, and he was our leader. And Raymond Washington was a type of guy that he had a unifying spirit, and his spirit would make you think that he was God. It was just two people that I ever wanted to see in my life when I was a kid, and it was Raymond Washington and Muhammad Ali. And I had experience to meet both of those guys. And right now, I really wanted to put a lot of this history on paper and writing because a lot of guys don't know the gang culture or they don't know actually exactly what happened to Los Angeles in the 80s. Not only that, my family had an opportunity, but not an opportunity, a real bad day fighting with the police department, sheriff, the police department, and the police slapped my mother, and then we start fighting. and all the police came and everything. They took my mom to jail and everything. My mom was a soldier, and that's why we always had a big family with a Fisher family. And then, you know, we had a guy that was pretty much my enemy in elementary and junior high school. A guy named was T Tiger, and T Tiger became a known guy over in our neighborhood, and he ended up getting killed. But he was a standing pop locker, dancer, and there was a lot of guys that he really knew how to coordinate and put together. But the reason they call me Fish is one of the reasons they call me Frisk. I had to, I learned from a guy named Whitey Enterprise, Third World, Ozone, and all those guys, Jimbo and all those guys from South Park. I always learned that it was a guy named Whitey. Whitey was one of the most talented drug guys I ever seen in my life. He was one of the most guys that I looked up to. I looked up to him. I looked up to Tootie Reese. I looked up to Melvin Butler. I looked up to Jesse and Droopy. I really liked the Main Streets. But, you know, it was just, I always had a love for Crips. And when the Crips started beefing with each other, I never wanted to be a part of that. I remember the guys I used to see Big Honcho at the street race. We had a thing at the street race. We had a thing that we just was all love in LA. And then I don't know what happened. It just seemed like it just turned to witchcraft. And the guys started beefing, and then it was all over at Los Angeles. And I never really wanted to be a part of that beef, but I wanted to understand that how could I unify Crips and Bloods, just Crips in Los Angeles. And one of the reasons the Crips in Los Angeles is so terrible is because of the LAPD. I want to shut that one down. But the reason they call me Fish is because they say that I was putting cocaine in water and taking it to another state. I wanted to be like Freeway Rick. Freeway Rick lived by the freeway. Whitey lived down in the 40s. He had a spot in 40, and I lived on 68. And I had figured out an identity, something that I knew how to do good, and that was transporting. They say I was transporting cocaine and water. I'm gonna put it like that because I wanted to have a good route to get the drug.